It is your PrisonPlanet.tv memberships that fund so much of what we do here on this operation. And then we're more than happy for the TV show after it's aired live, then be leaked out onto the web to tens of millions of people. That's our goal. My friends, we have another full of key information to cover on this September 5th, 2012, Wednesday edition. We're going to be here for the next 3 hours. Coming up, Dr. Richard Stallman, one of the main inventors of open free software, GNU and others. He'll be joining us to talk about all the Trojan horses built into the entire infrastructure that he's been warning of for more than 2 decades, turning our entire planet into a DARPA-run control grid. Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, writer for the New York Times, other major publications, who has been somewhat successfully suing the federal government over the NDAA, will be joining us for 30 minutes as well at the start of the next hour. And this is going to be a big broadcast lined up today, especially when we've got cases of people now being arrested at airports and on the streets at the DNC because they're protesting peacefully, and the Department of Defense is over it. They're calling it low-level terrorism and likening it to bombing the Pentagon to protest. And they asked the judges, hold them in jail. They plan to protest, which is terrorism, because our policy says it is. So now being on the watch list, which no judge, jury puts you on, you just get arrested. So the NDAA is being implemented, and it's just happening like it's no big deal. Also, I mentioned this briefly yesterday, but I only mentioned one small area of it, that it's usually government that's leaking data on purpose. But hackers embarrass Apple with data leak, and this is tens of millions, 12 million plus, Apple passcodes. Apple ID, so they can get into everything with that, basically. And so if you have an Apple ID, you need to change it right now. But the point is, by the way, I have Apple devices. They haven't been sending me messages saying, change my passcode. So there you go, because they're complicit in it. And it just shows the chronic ignorance of the media, because most of these aren't even operatives. They're just pulled from generations of dumbed-down, compartmentalized people. That in the Telecommunications Act of 96, of 2001, and in other major pieces of legislation, it funds and mandates backdoors in everything. All smartphones, all cell phones, all computers, all washers and dryers, alarm clocks, AM, FM, radio, VHF, UHF, cable systems, satellites, IP companies with more than... internet companies with more than 100 customers. It's all in there. The hubs are built in. As I said, the phone companies are the NSA. I told you that in 1996 because I read the stinking Telecommunications Act, which engineers, I was only on the radio in Austin then, contacted me and came to the radio station and said, read this. It's the Telecommunications Act. I went and checked, and they said, I can't tell you what's going on, but the phone company is the NSA. I had whistleblowers, just like 5 years ago, the guy in San Francisco came out and said they've got whole rooms, whole floors. I mean, we broke this in 96, not because I'm special. I had a radio show. They knew I'd put it on. They brought it to me. I had a Time Warner engineer contact me and go, the new digital scientific Atlantic systems have a microphone. The computers are listening to you with keyword. Later it came out. I had the same engineer say these OnStars are being listened to. We can see how many times they're being accessed. They're being accessed millions of times a week. They're listening in live time. Later came out in the news. Now they kill these people when they try to get info out. I mean, we're deep into this. It's all totally illegal, but the FBI playing on ignorance, says, we didn't have your code. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday, 5th day, 2012 edition. We do have Chris Hedges, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, who has been somewhat successfully suing the occupational banker government over the NDAA, where they say they will secretly and now are disappearing American citizens off the street. They've now shifted from Al-Qaeda being the reason they're abolishing the Bill of Rights and Constitution over to domestic groups that do not support the New World Order, and openly saying if you don't accept foreign banks, quote, occupying the U.S. and, quote, making us slaves of international banks, then you're a terrorist. So they've pretty much gone from denying all this exists to saying if you don't accept it, you're the terrorist, which is what you'd expect by a foreign corporate takeover of your government. And now here we are. They're trying to shut the move towards shutting down freedom on the web and a lot more. Okay, also, Dr. Richard Stallman dealing with all the different backdoor systems built into your cell phones, built into your smart meters, built into your washers and dryers, everything tracking you, the FBI caught as usual, one agent with the passcodes to 12 million people's computers. I mean, that's how they operate. Google, I told you a decade ago when they first launched those Google cars, or about 9 years ago to be technical, was driving around for the NSA, hacking your computer and stealing your data. Because it's not really hacking, because they have the access master codes already hard built into all the major computers. They mandate if Chinese, South Korean, Singaporean, Indian chips are to be sold in the West, in agreements, they have to have back doors built into them so that governments and corporations can instantly access your computer and track you, watch you, listen to you in live time. This is in all the patents. Google, 7 years ago, put out press releases to its shareholders admitting they're watching you in your home. They're listening to every word you say. They are the NSA. Oh, it's so fun. You're such an idiot. But then when you complain about it, they say, oh, conspiracy theory, even though it's in a press release. So that's how they operate. And then when people finally start going, hey, there's backdoor tech built into all the chips, they go, yes, the communist Chinese, they did it. They've got backdoors in all of our defense tech. And they're hacking in, and missile systems are failing, and the Phalanx gun system is failing on board the destroyers. It's those dirty commies that the bankers set up in power in '49, putting Mao Zedong in. The Rockefellers bragged in the New York Times, 1977. I have copies of it in the Endgame Blueprint for Global Enslavement. Went to the UT Law Library, pulled up the New York Times, right there praising how they put the commies in. and pay to ship all our jobs and have tax incentives to move, or pay to move entire factories over there with your tax money. But then say, give your rights up, the commie Chinese are going to get you. Gotta love that. Or if you're against endless wars and the New World Order, oh, you must be pro-China. See, that's the little mind games they play. You see, the globalists are neo-colonialist, but they're not just colonizing the third world. They're now deindustrializing in a takeover mood, move the first world. That's their real program. And then they have a bunch of low-level acolyte, quote, communist, socialist liberals who are anti-Western, who believe they're destroying the West to build up the third world, but really, in actuality, it's destroying the third world and the wealthy West, which has come out in the Copenhagen climate change treaties, global tax treaties, where they admit it's for world government. I mean, it's just all there. It is a neo-feudalistic, anti-industrialization program being carried out against the population of the world. But the neocons will tell you in movies like 2016, Obama's America, that, oh, he's just anti-American. And so that's why he's paying to shut down our jobs and paying to shut down our power plants and doing all of this. Well, Mitt Romney supports shutting down the power plants. Mitt Romney has the exact same policies in actuality because he's run by the same interest. Why is Obama put in power by Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase? Why didn't the Republicans tell you about that? No, they want you to think he's a communist who wants to destroy America. No, 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 no. He's a globalist minion leading a crew of communists who are too stupid to understand the real program. You know, they do this in most theorem in the last 120 years or so. They shifted from wide spectrum research to a dogmatic teaching system in universities of competing theories that, well, nature is what makes you the man you are or the woman you are. No, it's nurture. Well, no, it's both nature and nurture. Or they come out with theorems on, does environment cause illness? The amount of food you're getting, malnutrition. That was the dominant theory till about 1900, that's what allows germs to make you sick. And then they said, no, it's the germ itself and it's your genetics. Well, it's both. It's both theorems. But one theory fell out, one thesis fell out, the other then became the orthodoxy. When you actually study all of these different thought processes the globalists put out, there's truth in all of them, and the globalists have higher level specialized schools where they unify the fields and say, here's how you really think. They have special economic schools above the Chicago Business School, above the Chicago School of Economics. And I've had former MI6 officers on about this. I've had top bankers on. I've had top regulators on to top economists to break this down, how you're then sent to special schools when they're ready to make you a vice president. And they're like, now here's how it really works. Sit down, Mr. Beale. In fact, can we cue up the network Howard Beale speech, not the one where he's mad as Hades and not going to take it anymore, the one where Howard Beale goes to visit the head of the company. And he says, sit down, Mr. Beale. There are no more nations. There are no more countries. There are no more cultures. There is only corporations. And each of you has a piece of stock. Well, no, what he's really saying is each of you is a piece of stock, a human resource, and humanity is seen as cheap. Humanity is seen as trash to be carried away. The New World Order is teaching us that we're scum, teaching us we're ugly, teaching us we're bad, teaching us we're not fulfilled, preparing us with a racial memory to accept what they will call the end of the world. They have all the religions teaching it. They have the New Agers teaching it. But the end of the world's coming, and so lay down and die. It is a kill switch built into our psyche to give up. And they're teaching you that you are to be aborted. They don't just want to abort 50 million babies in America, 52 million the last 39 years. They want to get you ready to abort the natural development of humanity to satisfy the crazed ego of 180 IQ globalists who still are missing the deeper empathy and understanding, and who are so power mad they know they're getting blowback from what they're doing, opening the Pandora's box, opening the Ark of the Covenant, and all that's shooting out of it at them, but they cannot help it. They are like moths to flame. And yes, they're on fire with incredible intellects, but they're missing spiritual intelligence, spiritual discernment. They're not spiritually smart. And because of that, they may actually create the end of the world scenario that they use to make everybody stand down. So we do face the end of the world if we don't wake up and take action. And again, even if you believe it's the end of the world next week, the end of the world as we know it, the idea of turning loose of your destiny and just saying it's all over because somebody told you it was the end of the world is giving up on your destiny to live to the fullest. And see, that's why they don't want you to think you have a spirit or a soul. Because if you don't, well, then you won't care if it's the end of the world. You'll just selfishly go out and cheat other people and abuse yourself and never develop to a higher level. But if you understand that there are things that transcend these earth suits, if you understand that innately from your own experience and the flow of time, there is no past, there is no present, there is no future. There is the flow of time. What happened a trillion years ago happened and is happening and is flowing forward now. Do you understand that? I didn't read that in a book. I inherently know that, and the controllers know that. And so if they can teach you that nothing matters, well, you'll just turn loose of the reins. You'll turn loose of the wheel. You'll turn loose of the rudder. You'll turn loose of the direction and just give it to these people that crave it so much. And they'll be able to program you like a machine. But the minute you realize that there's more than just this body, the minute you realize the mystery and the magic and the power all around you, the minute you tune into just how incredible you are, the minute you discover that, the minute you find that secret, the minute you unlock that door, the minute you open that door, the universe lies before you, a veritable stairway to heaven. And they don't want you to ever have that. They don't want you to ever have access to that. They want you to calmly march off into the night. They want you to not exist. They want you to not be conscious. So they don't have to contend with you. They want to beat you over the head with a hammer. They want to lobotomize you. But they will fail. Now, we come back. It is incredible economic news that I will cover. Incredible TSA news, incredible NSA news, incredible war news, incredible AP, Washington Post, Detroit Free Press, CNN, all attacking Alex Jones at Infowars.com. Just Obama imploding. It's all coming up. Stay with us. I'll tell you, I'm pretty wound up today, as you can tell. I'm wound up about freedom. I'm wound up about trying to motivate and awaken my beloved humanity. All of us are brothers and sisters in the fight for freedom, in the fight for consciousness, in the fight for truth, in the fight for not being slaves, in the fight to destroy and smash into the ground in the information war, the control freaks that would suppress humanity, those who are afraid of unleashing the true power and true potential. Enemies of progress, enemies of our destiny, enemies, 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 eternal enemies. I have sworn on the altar of God eternal resistance over every form of tyranny. All right, let's just stop right there. This is a short segment. I'm going to come back in the next segment and try to focus myself here and get into this. We have an excellent example of mind control manipulation, a massive PR campaign. We covered one yesterday, launched over the weekend, saying that organic food was a ripoff. You know, you need pesticide, hormone-laden, GMO-laden McDonald's. And we countered that. We've got a huge report dealing with the 1.4 billion bullets. How do you derail an awakening to the fact the government isn't our government and is in a huge arms race building up against us? How do you do that? Same way you try to derail an awakening to drones. We're going to break that down after the break here and get into just so much more. Apple, you know, the FBI with your passcode without warrants, watching everything you do. I mean, I'm going to give you the full breakdown. But since I mentioned the 1974-75 film Network, where Howard Beale, the newscaster who's woken up to reality, you know, and that we're being fed a bunch of lies, he wakes up, he gets called in by the real salesman, who, you know, is the head of this major corporations because he knows how to sell. Came up from selling sewing machines or whatever he tells him. And in this, the New World Order is throwing in your face the corporate line I've been given by big presidents and CEOs of media companies years ago when they tried to turn me to the dark side about globalism and how it was really to help people and it was already in place and it was feudal to resist. What they don't tell you here, where they're throwing it in your face, because I've been giving speeches similar to this off the record, is that they want to get you into the global economy, not to empower people, but so they can start cutting off the resources and you have nowhere to run. They don't tell you the eugenics end of this. They don't tell you it leads to a high-tech ditch where they shoot you in the head, but they shoot you in the head with bullets of GMO and aspartame and fluoride and MSG. Welcome back, my friends. I appreciate you joining us today on this Wednesday transmission. Coming up, Chris Hedges, Pulitzer Prize winner, to give us the latest on the police state and his fight against the NDAA and American citizens now disappearing off the streets for the crime of terrorism. And what's terrorism? Peacefully protesting. And the LAPD is now arresting people in their front lawns taking photos, saying it's terrorism. They've got the deputy police chief quoted in the news saying, well, they're terrorists. We know of 5 cells operating in L.A. Really, you do, huh? You mean the 10,000 missiles our government gave al-Qaeda in Libya and now Syria? By the way, they're on the news blowing up hospitals and blowing up and attacking airports and threatening civilian terrorism and being praised by NATO. NATO is advising al-Qaeda to blow up hospitals. And it's in the London Telegraph. Gee, al-Qaeda, good job blowing up that hospital. That's the biggest war crime you can do. Oh, you're blowing up ambulances now. Oh, man, al-Qaeda, they're really good guys, I tell you. That Alex Jones, he's a traitor. He doesn't like al-Qaeda. I got a big stack of news on that. I mean, it's all reached Twilight Zone proportions. The TSA has come out and responded and said, you bet. When we see you buy a Starbucks coffee or a Coca-Cola at McDonald's inside the airport, past the checkpoints, we're going to come up and check and see if it's a bomb. And they said we like to be, quote, unpredictable. That's the little cheeky response. It's all just that arrogance. Hey, we know it's stupid. It's about you doing stupid stuff when we give the orders, you little puny ant. You got that, scum? Good. I'm glad you do, because next we're on the highway and then your house. And the police under federal grants are going to take your blood. And we're going to take your blood to get a driver's license. You know how we do it? It's a Bill Clinton executive order. So it supersedes the Constitution. And now we're implementing it, Jack. And we're also implementing inoculating your kids with deadly vaccines without your consent. Doesn't matter if it's illegal. The governor signed an executive order. Pound sand, scum! Because we're keeping you safe from al-Qaeda. Yeah. We're going to jam this needle in your kid, and quite a few will have seizures and be brain damage. Others will die. Others will get cancer a decade later. Because we love you. We love you. Makes me sick how out in the open it is. See, I'm not in a trance. I'm not helpless. I'm not Stockholm Syndrome victim number 300 million. I'm awake. I see what's going on. And let me tell you, they're killing millions of us. Hundreds of thousands with this, hundreds of thousands with that. You know, the chem weapons, the cancer, the heart disease, the brain damage, the neurological disorders. They're killing us on the left. They're killing us on the right. And I'm sitting here watching their murder machine just roll on, just chewing people up, sucking them in and blasting them as bloody hunks out the back. And I'm supposed to just go along with it. Oh, the government's got a race for the cure, not a race to find the cause, why it's exploding. No, let's have the very people running the whole thing. Let's go raise money to give it to them to develop a cure for the elite, which we'll never get. While they kill us. They give us cancer like rats and then study how to cure even the worst cases on us. That's why they call MD Rockefeller medicine the practice. They practice on you. Just like psychologists 100 years ago in front of their students, you can pull up the photos online. You can pull up psychiatrist lobotomizing someone, photos. And it'll show all sorts of black and whites. There's even old film footage in the 20s where, you know, you've got somebody sitting there strapped down and all the psychiatrists are laughing, the psychiatry students, and they just take an ice pick and go, rah! You see the weird psycho look in the photos, and there's film of them doing it up in the 20s and 30s, just groogling an ice pick in the front of the brain, just crazed, getting off on it. Just like a murderer in a back alley wants to jam a ice pick in somebody's head, but they do it right in front of everybody because they're wearing a white lab coat of the high priest. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And we just take it because they wear a blue uniform. They wear a white lab coat. While the Queen of England, she wears a big crown with jewels in it. I mean, she's got an ancient headdress on. How about we all run to some deserted island and try to find some pygmy king and bow down to somebody in New Guinea who's, you know, eating his neighbors because he's got big plumes of the paradise bird in his head, and nobody else is allowed to wear those. So we just fall down and say, "Kill me, eat me, chop my heart out because your government, your God, oh, thank you for everything you do. Thank you for all the scum. Thank you for all the trash. Thank you for organizing armies of nothing control freaks with stunted brains to rule over greater men and women. Thank you for all the ugliness you wrought. Thank you for all the disease. Thank you for all the stupidity. Thank you for all that flows out of your hell pit. Our humanity is just kicking at the gates like a battering ram to ram down the enemy's fortress. And to see you rise, 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 awaken, come alive. Refind your humanity. And they call this being a maniac. I call this being alive. 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 Yes, more. I want to be alive. And that concludes the rant portion of this transmission. I need to go ahead and get into the news. But I'm here ranting because this is how I feel. I've tried intellectual debates. I've shown you the facts, everything. And all I know is all I can do is show you your own humanity that's in me. Show you the fires of liberty. Show you what built the Panama Canal. What built the plane at Kitty Hawk. What built the Saturn rockets. What created the music of Beethoven, who would run around crazed in his studio. Just like I am right now. This is what creates civilization. This is what humanity is. This is who we are. All right. Refine your humanity. Refine your resistance. You are under attack. Ahead of Chris Hedges joining us, and Dr. Richard Stallman, I need to settle down and cover the news here. I just hate seeing my people slaughtered. I hate seeing you hurt. I hate seeing you dumbed down. I hate the crime of shuttering your intellect. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I want you to succeed. I want you to have everything. I want you to be successful. I want to be successful. And I am one with humanity. You are one with humanity. And I want all of us to live and our progeny to have a future. I want to see spacecraft launch with colonies to go to those nearest stars where we're already discovering clearly habitable worlds. But if the globalists have their way, they've decided our development, what they call our evolutionary track, they say that humanity is bad, that we're going to merge with machines. They've already made that decision. That should be a choice. Colonies that wish to merge with machines should go their way. Those of us that wish to develop and to take time need to be able to make our decisions, not have a bunch of crazy globalists with inbred syphilitic design. That's where all this was formed. This master plan 160 years ago was in that embryonic fetid nursery. And I say it's all a lie, and I talk directly to the controllers. You know I know your mind. You know I know your deepest secrets. You know you have lost your humanity. You are cancer. Instead of telling us how we should kill ourselves all day and how we should stand down and how we shouldn't breed and how we should die, I say you either grow up or you die. You kill yourselves. You kill yourselves first. Show us. Oh, but no, you've got the special humanity. You want us to die so you can go forward. I will tell you, you will not ever partake of what God has in store. You will never cross the River Jordan, New World Order. You will never go to the next level of humanity. You are damned to hell, and you know it. You will never be part of it. You will fail. You failed from the beginning. Excuse me. Your attack on our species will be grievously visited upon you by yourselves, by your own creation, your own work. God will use the pits you've dug for us to destroy you. All we need to do is testify to the truth, and the fires you've built for us will consume you. And I take no pleasure in that, watching you damned from creation, watching you formed in your mother's womb, deployed into the world like a torpedo of death, to attack everything good. All right. This is why I'm really feeling, ladies and gentlemen, when I'm up here covering the news. This is what I'm really thinking about. Everything they're doing is just window dressing on a predetermined, pre-planned, managed wormhole that leads us to a very bad place. A dark vision of these crazy people that I do not wish to allow them to manifest. And there's a fight between those of us that want goodness and those that want badness. And you've got to choose what you want. And you've got to decide what you serve. But you must decide now. The decision is what is important. And then everything else flows through it. The floodgates will open. Everything flows from the spiritual decision that you're not going to find in these establishment churches that are government run. And in these dark times and in the age we've now entered, you must understand the truth. All right, let me attempt to get to the news now. I have all these guests coming up. It's like 65 degrees in here, but I'm so hyped up, I'm sweating. All right. Let me just hit this, not because we're all over the news. Usually when we're in the news, which is every day, I don't even cover it. But when it's informative, I do. So, when it was announced 30,000 drones, FAA funded $46 billion, or 45.6 to be technical, memory serves, this year funded, to put the 30,000 drones in the sky and to authorize it and arming them and the police announcing it. Kurt Nimmo wrote an article with a bunch of links to them spying on farmers with manned aircraft and drones in North Dakota and arrests being made with Predator drones and all the rest of it. And the Associated Press, Washington Post, over 500 newspapers that I saw, because I went and looked. Over 500 newspapers came up with a hoax a few months ago saying there are no drones. InfoWars is lying. DrudgeReport.com is lying. It was manned aircraft spying on people. They just cherry-picked one link in our story and just went off on that to deceive their readers. Now, I was at a Barnes & Noble like 14 years ago and saw a psychology magazine. I opened it up, and it was bragging about, in the 50s, British psychological warfare manuals. I told the story 10 times. I'll tell it again. And I'd already organically seen this, but there they were admitting it, that if British mercenaries for the crown killed 10,000 people in an African country for gold or diamonds, they would, before the media got it, they would report that 15 had been killed. And put out a fake story that the troops were killed defending themselves. So that later when it comes out that they killed 10,000 plus, it's in cold blood to get the area, the whole villages, that people would differentiate and become confused and make the thought process about what's true and kind of like a hacking program, like a slow loris attack, where they just keep having the same request. Is it real? Is it real? They just enter questioning into it. That's why even though most troops know in World War I, when loudspeakers are saying, put up your hands, you know, you can go free, and they put their hands up and get shot, most troops figured it out, but still some would panic and put their hands up and be machine gunned. And others would suddenly panic more and be machine gunned. Oh, I'm not being attacked. Oh, shoot me. See, it's all psych warfare. So there they were bragging about it. And that's what this is. They only have like 15 or less attacks they run at AP, Reuters, CNN. And they think they're real smart because they work at the Ministry of Truth like Winston Smith, and they get to sit there and lie to people, and they're on the winning team. Oh, they're really cool. Oh, it's really cool what they do. So Watson, a month ago or so, starts reporting off of public purchase orders, 250 million rounds of ammo, 450 million, 750 million, 1.4 billion total. And then hundreds of millions, you know, of future purchases they're now announcing. Now they've, quote, classified it, even though it shouldn't be under federal law. You know, they black it out. They don't even have an authorization to do it. They just do whatever they want now, just like spying on you without warrants. And so what do? Well, about a week ago they started this, but the story keeps growing. They come out in, let me just go ahead and go over all this for you. They come out in the Detroit Free Press. Literally just dozens and dozens and dozens of publications. The AP is in hundreds of newspapers a day with this. Social Security, forget conspiracy theories. We bought bullets for fraud agents. Here's AP. Why does Social Security need 174,000 bullets? Social Security combats bullet rumors, CNN. On and on and on. Now, what they did is they took out of, I don't know, it's got to be more than 10 articles Paul Watson wrote about it. DrudgeReport.com linked to them, others did. It became big stories. This was something waking people up because our articles had armored vehicles being purchased by the hundreds, armored pillboxes by the hundreds, military drills, checkpoints, 1.4 billion bullets, admissions of preparing for collapse and civil unrest. And we're like, wow, they're really gearing up. So what do? You go in and find a link. They're like, well, why is Social Security Administration doing this? Well, why is NOAA doing this, the Weather Service? They find it and go, oh, and then they go and say, oh, it was a typo, a sub-agency. Well, still, it's about the 1.4 billion. Or, well, we need this for fraud investigations. The hollow point is for target practice, which is clearly a lie. You use ball ammo 99% of the time. The point is, you change the subject to like, oh, look at those conspiracy theorists. That means people concerned about 1.4 plus billion bullets being bought. And they said the conspiracy theorists said it was for civil unrest, but they're delusional, the articles go on and say. You know, these bad men who get upset about this. The government wouldn't want to hurt you. No, they're just wearing black uniforms and got cameras and beating people everywhere. And we have the biggest prison population in the world. And they're secretly arresting people now at airports and on the streets of Charlotte for peacefully protesting. People like James Tyson and the police, when they got to the jail, they said, well, why are you putting him in here? And they go, well, he was protesting, that's terrorism. And they asked the judge, they said, well, that's the terrorism. He's on the list, that's why he's in jail. No reason to be in jail. You're now on the list, no guns, no rights, no liberty, as Rahm Emanuel said. We've now reached this point, but we're not, our article's about all that. And they make it about, 174,000 bullets. It was for the police. I mean, come on. Now they can't have bullets, and they have law enforcement deans of colleges going, these conspiracy theorists are just out of control. We need 174,000 bullets for Social Security Administration. That's completely reasonable. That's only 600 bullets per officer per year. Our article's about 1.4 billion bullets. But see, they changed it with all these little old ladies getting the newspaper out and going, there's that dirty Alex Jones and Matt Drudge again. Look at them worried about 1.4 billion bullets. I mean, but they don't tell you the 1.4 billion bullets. They make it about 174,000. Just like British Intel made it about 10 dead, not 10,000 dead. See? You know, when I start ranting and raving on air, it's real, but it's not. That said, I could control myself and not do it. So it's real, that's how I feel, but I allow myself to do it. I let myself get a little bit out of control because it's therapy. I mean, I'm desperate. I'm upset. I know they're poisoning us, and I have all their own documents admitting it. I'm looking at Eco-Science written by this White House science czar right over there where he brags about it. I'm upset. And I don't like seeing people trapped in delusion and loving the delusion with preconditioned, hypnotic programming. I know I'm right. And when you have this kill grid being set up and you have all the torture and the wars and Homeland Security saying no Bill of Rights and Constitution and we the people are the target, if ranting and raving gets people out of their trance, which it does. See, at first it's entertainment for people. I always did this naturally. I didn't do it on purpose. I sometimes just got out of control, and it really helped make the show successful. So now, in the last few years, when I really feel like ranting, I don't do it as much as I used to. I used to do it out of frustration. Now I've gotten a little more disciplined and focused, so I don't do it as much. But then when I do it, it's even more out of control because that's how I feel. And so a lot of people like it. Some people don't. I'm sorry, it's real. And, you can't argue with success, but there are, again, the Associated Press is in hundreds of TV stations on their websites posted, and hundreds of newspapers. I can't even count them all right now. Basically coming out implying that the bullet story is an exaggeration by us. What they did is divert from the 1.4 billion, find one piece of minutia, and claim our report was that. And that's basically lying by omission. But AP was better than Detroit Free Press. AP at least linked to our report so you could see what we really said, which I have to commend, actually. That's better than what they usually do. Detroit Free Press just called us conspiracy theorists. Yeah, if knowing how things really work is bad and being concerned about 10-plus times the record purchase of ammo they've ever bought in a year and all the rest of it, and police arresting people everywhere. You film cops at a stop, they arrest you for terrorism. And you go to jail. It's now in 16 states are doing it. 16, well, it was 12 states just about a year ago. 16 states are now doing it. California and Texas are now doing it. And I'm going to film cops whenever I want. You arrest me and have some kangaroo court put me in prison. That's just the way it is. Hey, that's all on you, okay? And I'm not even against you individually, but just like a German soldier, you work for bad people. Doesn't matter if you're a good person. You follow orders that are evil, man, you're not my countryman, okay? And forget you were ever my brethren, okay? Shame on you. And believe me, your forebears, if they could see what you're doing, would be ashamed of you and would turn their back on you. Bureaucrats, control freaks, people like that, they would be ashamed of you. But, oh, you're on the winning team, and, oh, you got to do bad things to protect us. Bull. Bull. And it's all coming out, everything we told you. The NSA spying on you, tracker chips and everything. One FBI agent with 12 million Apple IDs can go right into your computer, see everything you're doing. No warrant. That's the great danger. It's like, oh, we're doing it to keep you safe, even though it's illegal. No, you're not keeping me safe doing that. And by the way, you funded the Russians, you funded the Communist Chinese, and you created Al-Qaeda. Because you're not un-American, you globalist. You're the foreign banks that have captured Europe and captured this country and now want to make us debt slaves. So you're turning our economies off to bring us down to our knees. And I'm not going to stand here and take it. Well, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who's been in a lot of serious war zones and reported on some of the biggest stories of our time is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He is Chris Hedges, and the website's truthdig.com. He has a new book out that we're going to be breaking down with him today. Days of Destruction, What Days of Revolt. I can't wait to read it. And he's saying, is revolt all we have left? Well, yeah, there are many forms of revolt. I mean, I went into, basically a preaching fit last hour, but it's effective. It shows my desperation. It's almost like my ghost dance here, wishing that we weren't going into such a fascist, corporatist tyranny. But Chris Hedges joins us, one of the few real liberal voices that you can say is respectable and really makes sense and who doesn't compromise. It's very scary to see none of the main conservatives against torture, secret war, the end of the Bill of Rights, and really hardly any liberals. In fact, a lot of them love it because it's empowering their precious state that they don't understand is now a corporate instrument. Chris, we're about to go to break here in a few minutes, but I didn't want to waste any time getting you on. Great to have you here, sir. Tell us a little bit about the new book.
Well, it goes to the sacrifice zones, the poorest pockets of the country that have been forced to kneel before unfettered corporate capitalism. And it's a kind of warning because they went first and we're next as we allow these corporate forces to reconfigure the country into a form of neo-feudalism, an oligarchic state backed by, the most intrusive security surveillance apparatus probably in the history of humankind. And I speak as somebody who covered the fall of East Germany. I'm very familiar with the Stasi state. There are no impediments left. So, it looks at places like Camden, New Jersey, which per capita is the poorest city in the United States, not surprisingly also one of the most dangerous, Pine Ridge, South Dakota, Lakota Indian Reservation, where the average life expectancy for a male is 48. That is the lowest in the Western Hemisphere outside of Haiti. The coal fields of southern West Virginia, one of the most minerally rich pockets of the United States, and yet, of course, harbors the poorest population, along with terrible ecological devastation. And finally, the produce fields, where these undocumented workers, who are the perfect worker in the eyes of the corporate state because they have no legal rights, they can be abused, there are no benefits, they work day by day, they show up in collection centers. When they don't have enough work, they sleep out literally under mango trees in Florida. And then we finally end with the Occupy movement, which is, again, with the title of the book, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt, that first bubbling, I think, of consciousness of revolt, of a recognition that we have undergone a corporate coup d'etat in slow motion, and it's over. Citizens United probably nailed the last peg in the coffin, and civil disobedience is, I think, all we have left.
Now, we're going to go to break here in a moment and come back and get into your case against the NDAA and all the amazing work you're engaged in, and just some of the signposts that we see showing that this, from my view, has been a conscious, Rand Corporation talked about it 15 years ago, construction of a system designed to implode the economy under a feudal system, as you said, using poverty as political control, because you can say what you want about America and what it's done the last 100 years, but even in the 40s, 50s, 60s, there was a plan to build up the third world and stuff. Now it is, no, make everybody poor and have private cities the elites live in. I mean, it's such a evil Malthusian view. I want to get your well-traveled, expert view on this from your perspective and talk about the book straight ahead after this break. Amazing interview coming up with Chris Hedges, truthdig.com. We'll tell you more about the book, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt. I'm Alex Jones with Infowars.com. That's right, and it was Thomas Jefferson that said, resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. Many other founders said similar things. But the point is that we are going into a classical tyranny. No one can deny it. The NSA has been caught spying on everyone in live time, totally illegal. They're arresting people, torturing them, torturing their children in front of them at Abu Ghraib. Bush brags about it in his book and doesn't get in trouble, even though his minions went to jail. And now Obama has accelerated it, and Romney signals he's going to accelerate it. We're in deep trouble. We've got an amazing guest joining us, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who has covered, you name it, the Stasi, the Russians, and many tyrannies. He's been in high-level coverage of negotiations all over the Middle East, and he sued earlier this year over the NDAA that Obama signed on December 31st when he thought no one was paying attention, 2011. He has a new book just out, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt. We're going to talk about that. We've only got him till the bottom of the hour. He's, again, gracious to join us, a very busy man. And I want to talk about his NDAA suit that's having some success. I want to get his take on everything that's unfolding. But now we have activists put on terror watch lists preventing protesting DNC. Turned out the Army, the ACLU, here's the ACLU press release just out yesterday on it. They got the document where the Army, DOD, did it. And they say in here that it's low-level terrorism to protest and ask the court to keep him in jail because protesting is now illegal. We are seeing, again, the FBI caught with 12 million IDs of folks with Apple computers. Here, joining us to break it down, is Chris Hedges, who I don't really need to go over more of his bio here. Most people know who he is or should know who he is, but he joins us now. Chris, what is the state of the world in your view?
Well, I think, one of the things we have to be clear about is that the assault on civil liberties, which began under the Bush administration, has in fact been accelerated by the Obama administration. It's worse under Obama than under Bush. When you tick off all of the things that the Obama administration has done over the last 4 years, refusal to restore habeas corpus, interpretation of the 2001 Authorization to Use Military Force Act as giving the executive branch the right to assassinate American citizens, whatever you think of these figures, like Anwar al-Awlaki, the Yemeni cleric, and then, of course, his 16-year-old son, who was never accused of anything 2 weeks later. The FISA Amendment Act, which I'm one of the plaintiffs, but will be heard in the Supreme Court on October 29th, which retroactively made legal what under our Constitution has always been illegal, the warrantless wiretapping, monitoring, and eavesdropping of tens of millions of American citizens who have done nothing, been charged with no crime, and we know that all of our personal information is now being stored out in supercomputers in Utah. The Obama administration has also employed 6 times the Espionage Act, which was never designed to ferret out whistleblowers as they are using it. These are people who have exposed war crimes. In the case of the CIA official Sterling, who purportedly leaked this information to Jim Risen at the New York Times, he's used it to essentially shut down anything that counters the official government narrative. And I was an investigative reporter for the New York Times. I know many of the major investigative reporters, and they will tell you that at this point, investigating anything the government does has become impossible. Even on background briefings will no longer be given because people are scared of being charged with the Espionage Act, as 6 officials have been charged, which, of course, brings with it prison time. And this brings us to the National Defense Authorization Act, which, as you mentioned, Alex, was signed by the President on December 31st, New Year's Eve, of course, a moment when he thought we weren't looking. Now, the National Defense Authorization Act, Section 1021, authorizes the U.S. government, or more specifically the executive branch, to condemn or label an American citizen a terrorist, and not only a terrorist, but in the language of that section, someone who has relationships with what they call associated forces, a term that's never defined. To use the military, this is contravening 200 years of domestic law, to detain these people, hold them in military facilities, strip them of due process, and if the military so determines, actually ship them to offshore penal colonies like Guantanamo and other black sites around the world in the language of this section until the end of hostilities, whenever that is. In an age of permanent war, that's a very long time. We challenged that in the Southern District Court of New York. Federal Judge Catherine Forrest issued a temporary injunction, in essence invalidating that section of the NDAA. We had a final hearing at the beginning of August, and in which Judge Forrest will now determine whether that temporary injunction will become permanent. But we know how the Obama administration will respond if she invalidates that section of the NDA, which of course I think she should. They've already challenged the temporary injunction. They will clearly challenge the permanent injunction if she rules that it is unconstitutional, as it appears she will. That will take it to an appellate court. If they uphold the ruling, it will go to the Supreme Court. But all of this comes under the Obama administration. And my frustration with self-professed liberals is that, they're entranced with the rhetoric of Obama and utterly ignore the facts, utterly ignore what he has done. And as you mentioned earlier, I think what we are seeing is, in essence, rewriting of the legal code to criminalize any form of legitimate dissent. And that's because the corporate power understands very well what's coming, both in terms of the environmental crisis and the economic crisis, and they want the legal mechanisms to shut it down. It's interesting that in the August, in the last hearing in Judge Forrest's courtroom, she, as the judge, actually brought up the detention of 110,000 Japanese Americans who, because of their ethnicity, were sent to internment camps, again, without any kind of legal recourse, and said that this section of the NDA essentially sets that precedent.
We are now reaching the Alexander Solzhenitsyn type moment, asking, will we burn later in the camps, wishing we'd done something? And now, 3 months ago, the Army document came out for re-education centers. The Army admitted in a press release that our document was real, but that we shouldn't have it. And another public document for gun confiscation during crises. They're buying armored vehicles. They've bought 1.4 billion rounds of ammo. The media spins it to say, hey, they need 174,000 rounds of ammo. No, it's 1.4 billion. So we're seeing all sorts of propaganda. Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist who's covered police states worldwide, Chris Hedges, joins us. We're going to talk about his book here in a moment. We're going to skip this network break so we have more time with him. What is the ruling class thinking? Because we've always had different corrupt elites and things, but there was still an understanding, even for the ultra-wealthy and powerful, that you want checks and balances going back to Magna Carta, because other elites can come in and rob you, and that nobody wants to live in a society that's not free. I mean, free societies are more productive, they're happier, they're better. What has happened to the ruling class that they're going, I mean, the Stalin, Mao, Hitler route? I mean, this is I mean, earlier in the shorter segment, I'd like you to recap that. You pointed out you've covered a lot of historical events that happened as they happened. This is one of the nastiest, most scientifically crafted, over the top. I mean, so many things that are in 1984 have now been surpassed, and now they're getting ready for the physical roundups. I don't think people understand, who haven't looked at history like you and others have, just how dark it is my point.
Yeah, I mean, in the language of patriotism, these people are traitors. And that's the difference, as you point out, between the older ruling elite, and I come out of the working class. They were certainly no friends to working men and women, frankly. But they cared about the sustenance of the nation. The new ruling elite is global. It, in the language of business, is quite willing to harvest the nation. That's how you've seen manufacturing jobs shipped overseas. And you look at labor conditions in southern China, where Apple products, I mean, all sorts of products that we buy are made, and it's out of Dickinsonian England. 70-hour work weeks, abusive conditions, no labor protection. And what they tell now workers around the world is that in order to be competitive, they have to be competitive, in essence, with prison labor in China or sweatshop workers in Bangladesh who make 22 cents an hour.
Exactly. We're Foxconn that Apple uses, while we're being lectured by Al Gore here domestically, they have to put suicide nets up.
Yeah, what happens is when they don't meet their quotas, and there's a good book by a Berkeley sociologist who's of Chinese origin who went and wrote about it, wrote about these conditions. When they don't meet their quotas and they don't make the profits, there are workers who will work and actually not be paid. And at the end of the month, they will climb up to the roofs of these overcrowded dormitories and jump off and commit suicide. And that's the world that these corporations have created. I mean, and that's the difference between the old robber barons, the Rockefellers, the Mellons, the Carnegies, and the new robber barons who are quite willing to sacrifice the nation, indeed are, for profit. When they do their speculative gambling on Wall Street and their bubbles crash, they loot the U.S. Treasury, and then they make the rest of us pay for it through austerity programs. You see the same thing in Europe because, of course, it's a global corporate movement, so that when Papandreou in Greece announces, okay, you want austerity, I'm going to put it to a referendum, he's gone within a week. And he's replaced with a banker technocrat that's, that is essentially pliable and a puppet of the banks and of the corporate interests. This is a global phenomena. We're not exempt from it. And these essentially narrow oligarchic corporate forces, and we see it. They make all their money here, and then they move overseas so they don't have to pay any taxes.
Well, they're moving to armored redoubts on Pacific Islands and admitting they are, and they're bragging that they're converting us to a tyranny and training the police that we're their enemy. I mean, this is a nightmare scenario, and the attitude is Americans are uppity. We're going to bring you down. We're going to cut you down to size, while lecturing people who are on welfare because they've destroyed the jobs base, while they are the biggest recipients of corporate welfare contracts, bailouts. And then in Europe, I've looked at the numbers, almost all of the real debt is owed by the big zombie banks, and they've done this trick of convincing everyone that the Europeans are lazy, and now today they're reporting that they want Greeks to work 6-day work weeks. And then most of the money is to be paid to the bankers that Greece is having to hand their islands over to. Yeah,
well, that's precisely it. And, that they will, corporations know only one word, and that's more. And they are going to push and push and push, like all sort of elites that have unplugged themselves from the reality around them. They're woefully out of touch with what most Americans are undergoing. And it is always the ruling elites that finally determine the parameters and configurations of revolt and rebellion. Because they have not responded rationally, as the columnist Paul Krugman writes week after week, to both the economic and political crisis, it means that there will be a backlash. What exactly it will look like, how it will appear, when it will appear, I don't know. I've covered revolutions in Eastern Europe, uprisings in Palestine, the war in Yugoslavia. But I do know, especially having spent the last 2 years on this book, in the poorest pockets of the United States, without any question, that it's coming.
And And the establishment knows that and is making preparations for it, I think, to use that crisis as a pretext to grab even more power. If you expand on this out into the future, what type of world do you think the ultra-rich, who are obviously monopoly capitalists, what type of world are they planning on building?
In essence, a kind of feudal system where you have a tiny, filthy rich oligarchic elite, a small sort of core of corporate managers, public relations people, in essence propagandists, and then the rest of us hanging on by our fingertips. And, you know, interestingly enough, this completely replicates the political and economic structure that Orwell painted in 1984 with Oceania, where you had an inner party of 2 to 4%, an outer party of about 12%, and the rest are what he calls proles. That's already, I mean, all you have to do is look out your window. At a decaying infrastructure, closing schools, closing fire departments, you know, closing libraries, long-term unemployment and underemployment, coupled with, you know, this kind of constant sustenance of criminal enterprise. I mean, look at Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs is bailed out every penny on the dollar by the American taxpayer, and now we give them, in essence, 0% interest loans so that they can gamble. I don't know what it is. It's not capitalism. I don't even know what to call it.
And then to loan it back to us at 10, 20, 30 or more percent.
Well, and they often don't loan. Talk to any small businessman. They can't get loans. I mean,
and why should the banks loan? They've got all the money they could ever want, taxpayer-backed money. Expanding on this, I went and saw Dinesh D'Souza's film, the 2016 Obama's America, and they were saying that Obama was anti-colonialist when really I see this as a new colonialism where it's these mega banks and mega elites that are destroying the nation states that were the old cores of the empire, not just exploiting the third world. They've brought the cancer home, but then they spin it that Obama is an anti-colonialist, and so that's why he's doing what he's doing. I mean, it's an amazing spin. Yeah,
I would agree with you. And, you know, we actually call the places that, you know, places like Camden internal colonies, because it is a form of colonialism. And, you know, just to go back to your point earlier about the militarization of police, you know, I think when you look at the war on, so-called war on drugs, you see the portal, the way they entered it, so that if there's a night raid now in Oakland, you have Kevlar-plated command helicopters, command centers, people dressed in black, carrying M16s. It looks no different from a night raid in Fallujah. And that's the point, that as the disintegration continues, the more brutal forms of control that are used on the outer reaches of empire migrate back to the heart of empire.
And the megacorporations then plan to even implode the old homelands and then just have a giant squalor that they rule over from private, heavily armed redoubts and cities. And that's now even their admitted plan, the Rand Corporation is saying. What a hellish vision. What a hellish world. It sounds like something the devil would come up with.
Yeah, and you have corporations like Bechtel buying up all the clean water in Chile and other places because they know that pretty soon water, you know, water for most of us will be contaminated and we'll have to pay for it, just like everything else. Yeah, I mean, they you know, if you sit down inside the NSA or any other, their sort of analysis of where we're going is not going to be much different from yours or mine. It just doesn't make it out into the mainstream.
Well, that's right. They've got British Ministry of Defense reports, Pentagon reports, admitting a hellish world. And then if I cover it, the media calls it pessimism porn. Won't this be the defining moment when your case goes to the Supreme Court if they don't uphold the Constitution? I mean, this will be overthrowing Magna Carta, habeas corpus. I mean, this is probably one of the biggest cases ever. What is it like to be at the center of this?
Well, it's sort of bizarre in a sense because I agree with you. I mean, it is, and the judge agrees with us, that this is just this amazing attempt to essentially strip us of the rule of law, of due process, and yet it doesn't get covered. It doesn't get covered because both the Republicans and the Democrats are essentially beholden to corporate power and the security and surveillance state. I mean, this was a bipartisan effort, sponsored by Carl Levin and John McCain. And so because the media won't step outside these very narrow parameters, which essentially stretch from A to B, that's what stunned me the most, how egregious the assault is, how naked the assault is, and how it's virtually uncovered. I mean, the New York Times did write a good editorial about it after the temporary injunction was issued, but if you look on the airwaves, it doesn't exist, and yet you have all these people sort of shouting about the Constitution and civil liberties, and here in an incredibly overt attempt to take away our right to trial, it's silence.
And now I see a lot of conservatives going along with this when the government's now said, don't worry about al-Qaeda, and we're going to use them and others to take down Syria and Libya and places. But, the new enemy is domestic threats, and they're out, like they've done with Muslims, provocateuring, militia groups in Michigan and things, trying to get some type of civil war going so they can now target the American people as the enemy. This is very cold-blooded.
I don't think it is a left-right issue. The American conservative just ran a long article called "In Defense of Bradley Manning," raising precisely these points. And that's why I think that, the political theater of the Republicans and the Democrats, is really a kind of a mass, money-drenched spectacle that diverts us from debating issues that I don't think, really, for anybody who cares about the rule of law and the democratic state, no matter what your political opinion is, there should be any divide on it all.
Well, that's right. We're all Americans. We're all humans. And if America becomes this pure tyranny, boy, the world better look out. If they think we've been doing bad stuff so far, Chris, look out. I know you've got to go. I'll talk to you briefly during the break if you can stay 5 more. I want to come back and talk about the book, but if not, folks.
No, sure. Let's do it.
Okay, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt. I have not read it yet. I will read it because, let me tell you, when I see Chris Hedges' videos online, he's focused. He knows what he's talking about. He's articulate. I get mad and just yell and scream. I wish I was like him. But then I'm just a constitutionalist. I want my Bill of Rights. I want my Constitution. If that's liberal, if that's conservative, then that's what I am. But I just love Chris Hedges, and he's so good to come on and talk about this with us. We'll be right back to talk about his book for a few minutes. Stay with us. Okay, we've got about 6-7 minutes left with Mr. Hedges holding over with us, Pulitzer Prize-winning author, journalist who's covered some of the most dangerous places in the world, and he's saying that, well, what he sees here in America, I want him to expand on that, is the worst he's ever seen so far. I want him to elaborate on that because it's intriguing. If I went over his bio here for folks that may not know who Chris Hedges is, he's been in over 50 countries. He's covered the big battle zones. He's covered world leaders. He's covered the Stasi and their activities. Just amazing. And he's got a new book out that we're going to be obviously breaking down as soon as I get a chance to read it. Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt. But I wanted him to go over basically what the book covers, because earlier he started mentioning that it's a reservation program. And I've interviewed a lot of Native Americans who've gone over the history. And they point out that Indian policy became what Hitler used. And I'd actually read that in Hitler's own writings, that he used that model of the concentration camp off the reservation. The company store that keeps control of the people, keeps them in poverty, their life expectancy, and that's the whole model now of this corporate state. Get rid of your jobs and then give you a pittance to barely even keep you at subsistence, destroying destinies, destroying societies, so you can control them. And now the corporate state doesn't want even free market competition. It's coming in with regulations shutting down what's left of our industry. I mean, it's a cold-blooded, systematic, military-style takeover. So, Chris, break down your new book, which I can't wait to read, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt.
Well, yeah, I mean, Alex, I think you nailed it. I mean, that's why we begin with Pine Ridge, because that's where it all began. And originally, those reservations were openly called prisoner of war camps. And you're right. They make self-sufficiency impossible and create this kind of culture of dependence, which destroys dignity, self-worth, community, with all of the attendant problems. That's why you have an estimated 80% alcoholism rate on Pine Ridge. And everywhere we went, whether it was Camden, whether it was southern West Virginia, where people are taking OxyContin, what they call hillbilly heroin, the sort of the drugs and the alcohol anesthetize people to the kind of pain and the suffering to which they have been reduced. And I think the reservation model is, in fact, one that we spent a lot of time reporting on and looking at for precisely that reason. When you reduce people to a level of desperation, it becomes far easier to control them. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, just all sorts of, just in the last few weeks, the refusal to restore unemployment benefits for hundreds of thousands of Americans, which means tens of thousands of these people will eventually lose their homes, a number now over 6 million. There's just Obamacare is another example. It's a corporate, essentially the equivalent of the bank bailout bill for the pharmaceutical and insurance industries, $477 billion in subsidies. And then, of course, they can keep, as anyone such as myself knows who doesn't have a company plan, keep jacking up co-payments and premiums. And
I've got to interrupt. See, you're the only scholar out there on the so-called left, but you're just a human who wants freedom, who's honest that the insurance companies wrote it, and then the right wing gives Obama cover and goes, how dare you want to make us commies, when the whole thing was written to let corporations control the quality of care, make you buy their product, and jack up the price. I mean, it's such a fraud, but then you've got all the people on the left who, meanwhile, supporting it through ignorance.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is, I think, a very telling piece of legislation because it was written in the Heritage Foundation. It was first put into practice by Mitt Romney when he was governor in 2006 in Massachusetts, and then adopted by Barack Obama.
Incredible.
Obamacare is Obamacare. And that is a kind of window into the kind of false debates that go back and forth, because both of these two political parties are slavishly devoted to corporate interests. Obamacare is essentially forcing us to buy a defective corporate product, a for-profit product. It's staggering.
And what is the revolt angle of the book? Because, again, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I'm going to order it today.
I think it's just this understanding that the formal mechanisms of power are not going to defend civil liberties or our interests or institute the kinds of reforms that will bring back the kind of egalitarian society that I think we all want. That now resistance has to come outside those formal mechanisms of power. That means acts of civil disobedience. I was arrested with Occupy protesters in front of Goldman Sachs. Going to jail is more time than I care to donate to the federal government. But I don't think we have any option left. And I'm not naive enough to even promise you that it will work. But I can tell you that the system is so corrupt. You take New York City police and you look closely, most of the egregious assaults against protesters were carried out by the white-shirted officers who were earning about $110,000 a year. There was a lot of fraternization with the blue uniform police because these corporations hire them, like Goldman Sachs and Citibank, as rent-a-cops for private security for $37 an hour in their off time so they can make some money.
Well, Goldman Sachs gave them, what was it? It was some giant amount of money the week before as a pure gift right to the police, a public bribe.
Yeah, J.P. Morgan, I think it was.
Yeah, J.P. Morgan. It was
right, exactly. I mean, and I think, when I covered the fall of East Germany, what happens is when the foot soldiers are no longer willing to defend the elite, when Erich Honecker, the dictator in East Germany, sent down an elite paratroop division to Leipzig, where I was, and they wouldn't fire on the crowd, Honecker lasted another week in power. And I think that, in fact, part of the reason I'm guessing that the NDAA was pushed through, I think, is because there's a kind of fear among these corporate oligarchs that the police won't protect them.
Well, that's one of my final questions here. I got a few to race through. I want to know what else is in the book, so people will definitely get it, because your ideas are right on from my own research, but so well laid out. That was my next issue. I'll guarantee you that if things continue to implode, the people they know that aren't going to shut up and go along are people like Chris Hedges, people like Alex Jones, people that they know are controlled by conscience, not because I'm some goody two-shoes, but because I don't want to live in a fascist state. I mean, I want my children to have a future. And they're really trying to set the precedent for this as they force people into a revolt, kind of arresting and, which they admit, scooping up people that they see as leaders.
Yeah, I mean, I think that once you create that legal mechanism that essentially permits or gives to the state that kind of power, then you're in really serious trouble. They use it on marginal elements within the society first, Muslims, black bloc anarchists, whatever, militia members, but you don't want to give them that kind of legal power, which unfortunately we've already done, because they use the sort of fringe elements as a way to justify that kind of power, and then they turn it on the rest of us. That's exactly right, and history has just borne that out, you know, in conflict after conflict that I've covered and watched.
What about geopolitically? It seems like the world is kind of waking up to the fact that the United States has been seized by very evil forces.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was quite an opponent of the invasion of Iraq on that issue, and I had been the Middle East bureau chief of the New York Times, because, you know, it was not only, you know, a tactical blunder, but probably one of the most strategic blunders we made, in essence, throwing the balance of power to Iran. Yeah, I think that, unfortunately, you know, we don't have a lot of friends left because of, I think, very misguided imperial projects that, again, of course, I mean, the war in Afghanistan, which, let's be frank, we're losing, you know, there are a handful of corporations, Halliburton and Raytheon and on and on and on, that for whom they make money, as in all wars.
Could the Anglo-American establishment kind of stall and not have a Berlin Wall moment, but just kind of collapse like the Soviet Union?
I mean, that's the big question. I mean, collapse is coming. How does it come? Does it come gradually? Is there kind of a slow decline like the Ottoman Empire? Does it implode? These are questions that I ask all the time, but I don't have a definitive answer.
Well, I think they're going to try to go Hitler crazy and launch a bunch of wars that are so bad, everybody kind of lines up because we're in so much trouble. Well, yeah, the government's corrupt, but we're, you know, fighting Russia and China now, so let's line up. We just lost 500,000 people. I mean, I think the elite are that crazy. And the way they're digging in, the way they're getting everything ready, looks like they're gearing up for World War III at a scale much bigger than the Cold War. The COG, the armored pillboxes, the weapons caching. Studying history, Chris, in closing, I'm not just trying to be a fearmonger here. I'm scared. I mean, I've studied history. I'm a history buff. And they're digging in for what looks like not just a war with the people, but a war with everybody else.
Well, you know, that's, as Randolph Bourne said, in World War I, he said war is the health of the state, by which he meant that when the state declares war, you're right, everybody lines up behind it, you know, in the name of patriotism and everything else, and it is a very effective measure, as it was in World War I, to essentially crush any form of dissent. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, history has shown that to be a very effective tactic for despotic states to channel energy and rage and mute internal dissent by creating an internal enemy and going after it. I don't put it past them.
Well, hopefully your book will wake people up, and I know it's got amazing illustrations in it. Tell us a little bit about the book that you haven't covered and about the cartoonist that you worked with.
Yeah, this is Joe Sacco, who is an amazing reporter in his own right, does whole graphic novels that he reports out. We met in Bosnia in 1995. And I think one of the reasons I found him so important in the book, 50 pages of illustrations, as well as comic panels sort of profiling people's lives, is that so many of these Americans by the corporate media have been rendered invisible. And I think one of the goals of the book was to make them visible, and Sacco did that, gave the book a kind of punch that pure prose wouldn't have had.
Do you have hope for the future? I mean, would you say it's a 60% chance we're going to go into this total tyranny, or is it a 70% or a 20%? I mean, what's your... there's few people who've traveled more, seen more, reported on more, so I really respect your view on this. I know our listeners do. I mean, looking into that crystal ball, what's our odds?
I think it looks pretty bleak, but I don't think we can use the word hope unless we actively resist every way possible, which is why, I was in protests outside Goldman Sachs, why I sued Barack Obama and Leon Panetta over the NDAA. I think it's a kind of moral imperative to resist, but at the same time, a very sort of sober view, it doesn't look great.
Have you been threatened?
Yeah, but over my opposition to the Iraq War, and then interestingly by black bloc anarchists, who I've been very critical of.
Well, most of them are run by feds. Well, Chris Hedges, that's what I found from my research.
I'm sure.
Again, your website is also a great place for people to visit. Tell us about your website.
TruthDig, yeah. This is Bob Shear's website out of L.A. I write a column every Monday for them.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, Alex.
All right, there he goes. I ended up spending more time with us. Man, I wish he was wrong. I wish I was wrong. Last hour I kind of went into this ranting rage about the tyranny we face. But, I've bet my family that we can beat this. Let me tell you, if I didn't think we could turn this around, I would leave the United States. Not that somewhere else would be perfect, but I would get out of the fight. Because, let me tell you something. The people running things have made a friend with evil. They have decided that they're going to rule the world. They've got the power. They've got this historic moment. They're going to use it. And we've got to decide we've got our historic moment as human beings that stand for freedom and justice to resist these people. Because, Chris Hedges talks about how they want to render us impotent and where we can't have jobs in the future. That is the policy of the globalist. And, Obama is not anti-colonialist. Colonialism became what you call globalist. And then the right wing packages anti-colonialist as communist when the communists are actually running their own form of collectivist colonialism that then implodes and is taken over by the bankers. We're facing such a sophisticated situation. People say, well, are you for Occupy or against it? The globalists talked about Occupy because their computers were able to predict that there would be flare-ups at that moment against the banks, and that people knew that the banker bailouts were a corporate transference of wealth from the people to the elite. Just a robbery, a private taxation mechanism. So they announced, everybody who's mad at corruption in Wall Street, show up. Then the Democratic operatives show up, but a lot of other activists as well. Soros is unable to take control of it. That was going to be kind of the revolutionary arm of the Obama second election. But with the corporatists running it, the Occupy folks got wise to that, didn't work, so then they flushed them. And Obama, in 37 locations nationwide and in multiple, a whole bunch of states, 14 states, had people arrested in midnight raids directed by the feds. Folks, when your police are being directed by feds to scoop up protesters, you're not in Kansas anymore. You're in a dangerous police state. And what people don't get is, well, I don't care if I'm in a police state. I want cops and guys with machine guns on every corner because it's for Al-Qaeda. But see, it's not for Al-Qaeda now. It's for you. And it's because they're planning to take your bank account. They're planning to devalue your dollar. They're planning to take your pension fund. And I don't mean the government pension fund. I'm talking about your private ones. They're already doing that in Europe, putting taxes on them and stuff. I've got financial news on Europe I'm going to get to after, I guess Dr. Stallman's joining us, and I'm almost out of time. Where is my financial stack? Let me just hit a few of these right now. This is so serious. Folks, and for the minions that are serving this, we're not coming back from this, okay? You notice the deeper we get into globalism, NAFTA, GATT, any of it, things get worse. Because it's meant to be bad. If they write white papers on it, it's horrible. It's not my opinion we're signing on to evil. It's happened. The same robber baron families funded Hitler. Okay, we're in trouble. These elites put Mao into power because they wanted to have a strong guy take over. Our government put Mao Zedong into power. That's been declassified for about 10 years. I just got chills saying that. Do you realize under globalist funding, he killed, the Chinese say 85 million people. The CIA says 64 million. Man, they aren't playing games. They want to reorganize and kind of erase the disc, clear the table in America and Europe. And they are lining up the troops and the military to do it. And they're going to do most of it with starvation. And, man, I just don't want to go down this road. I mean, they've got America in the guillotine. And I'm saying, let's get our head out of here, man. Let's get our neck out of this thing. Let's wake up and say no. No, no, no. Well, you just heard a Pulitzer Prize-winning top journalist tell you we're going into absolute hell. And I have all the documents. I should have brought this up to him. It'll be about eugenics, about how they would give the blankets with smallpox and poisoned food and water to the natives to make them weak. They'd kill the strongest members. They'd kill people that tried to lead. And again, that was done to a minority. That's how cultures always do it. But then it ends up getting exported onto everybody. And now the troops have their death benefits that they take part of their check out of if they sign on to it and just steal it. And it was in Bloomberg and AP a couple times 2 years ago and never again. It's like, yeah, we take the death benefits of vets from World War II right through to the current conflict. Yeah, we run a scam on them. And yeah, the big banks launder the drug money and run the aircraft. And yeah, the troops grow the opium. And yeah, the troops are dying and have all these increased cancers and their kids are deformed from DU. But so what? Hey, did we tell you we're going to forcibly shoot your kids up in school and make them, have abortions and say that they gave consent at 12 to have an abortion because we threw them in a truck and took them and had them sign a form? I mean, the government is just power grabbing, and it's moving faster and faster. And I'm sitting there watching it happen. And then I look at my kids, and I look back at America, and then I look at my kids, and I'm like, do I get out of here? I've said I'm going to stay to the end, but these people don't understand what they're up against. Because if we knew what we were up against, we would say no. If you knew how bad it was, the danger is letting this win. People think, oh, it's dangerous to fight this. No, 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 no. Yeah, for people like me, sure. But for you, the danger is in going along with it. I mean, if I was a cop and there was somebody filming me down the street, it's something I was doing, I wouldn't run over and arrest them. You know that's the First Amendment. You know they're not a terrorist. Shame on you. You take their right away, you're going to get yours taken away, you idiots. You idiots. Do you have any idea what you're doing? How much danger going along with these orders is putting everybody in? And it's so planned. It's all in the Rand Corporation public documents. I remember reading Rand Corporation stuff in 98, 99, where there will soon be a giant terror attack and we will radically re-engineer America. Prepare for the attack. This will happen after the attack. And it was clear they were saying that it was going to be staged. And that was a good thing. And I'm just like, what? Hey, everybody, they're going to stage terror. They've done it before. Look, look. Now look what happened. See, they did it. Moody's lowers outlook. And you're like, our government did it? Yeah, the criminal elements that run our government and run Al-Qaeda did it. Yeah, you bet they did. And your naivete doesn't protect you. It endangers you. It allows this to happen. Moody's lowers outlook for European Union's credit rating to negative. Well, I mean, but I thought they gave the foreign bankers all their money. That would fix it. Oh, as I told you, it's only going to get worse because it's designed to. And then they always pose as the savior. Breakdown, 3 tons of food looted from grocery stores in Spain as millions struggle. Yeah, they're still getting their welfare checks, but their currency doesn't buy it anymore. Food stamp use climbs to record, reviving campaign issue. 46.7 million. That's only one type. It's more like 70 million are on partial food stamps. Let's continue. Chart of the day, 803 years of global inflation, 803 years of global inflation. And it shows how there's been as much inflation in the last 100 years as there had been in the 800, 900 years previous. There's no inflation. Continuing here with the news, ladies and gentlemen. EU says Greeks should work 6 days a week. CNBC, yeah, because they're lazy. Most of that debt's the bankers, but they sign you onto their debt and then tell you how they're lazy. Incredible. 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 Ladies and gentlemen, another hour coming up. Dr. Stallman's going to join us about all the spying and NSA behavior and how it's it's not just 12 million, it's all of them. The FBI is on record with backdoors and everything, but the FBI caught with 12 million of your Apple passcodes. Google driving around. Guys, reprint me on like a few mainstream headlines to show folks of Google caught hacking passcodes with their little spy cars. It's a privatized NSA front. So the NSA guys can give themselves billions of your tax dollars and call it Google. It's so funny how they run everything. I'm being a little flippant there because I'm just sick of it. See, I can laugh or I can start yelling and screaming. And the thing is, I'm weird watching total evil unfold that I yell and scream. I'm supposed to just sit here calmly as we go to hell in a handbasket. I don't know. If it keeps going down this road, I'm going to have to at least get my family out of here. I've promised to stay myself, but I mean, I'm getting to the point of like having to have the realization to sell everything I got and get out of this country before they won't let me leave. And they're gearing up with that where you can't leave the country if the government says and all this crud. But I don't want to be one of the idiots that stays behind and then gets arrested by these trash, these criminal bank robbers that have hijacked our country. Some of the headlines at Infowars.com. If passengers don't like how you look, they take you off as a terrorist now. American Airlines disallows boarding of 16-year-old with Down syndrome. Adon Salazar wrote that for Infowars.com. Yet another DHS worker files discrimination lawsuit against Big Sis, and the women being accused are resigning. All the little special friends, the little lapdogs of Janet. Oh, can you just see Janet in a latex Catwoman suit? I mean, that's what's going on here. Yet another DHS worker files discrimination lawsuit against Big Sis. And then think of these people. They come up with, and then take the little kids in the back rooms and have people take their clothes off. And then stick stuff in their coffee. They've gone through the checkpoint. Drive them into submission. And then, Big Sis gets on the phone and tells the men in her office, get in here, scum. I mean, it's just like, who else do you think? I mean, who do you think runs tyranny? It's a bunch of crazy people. Oh, man, I tell you, I'm crazed for liberty, though. They're crazed for evil. That's what you got to understand. You got to be crazed, folks. You got to decide what side you're on, and then you got to become electrified. You got to become human. Humans don't act like these little pathetic, soft, cowardly, domesticated creatures. I was swimming this morning in the river, and a lot of people swim in it, and there's these big, giant, 2-foot-long bass that are basically domesticated. And I was swimming in Barton Springs, going into the river, and there's these big, giant, 2-foot-long bass right there. Now, out somewhere where they're fished or bowed, they run from you. But they just sit there, and it's the same thing. We're like dodo birds in this country. Just have no idea what a threat is. It's like in the opening scene of 2001 Space Odyssey where the animals aren't yet, being hunted by man, so they're not afraid of man. They're just kind of standing around. That's what animals really do when they've never had a predator after them. And see, I've still got all my instincts. For whatever reason, when I see predators and stuff being set up, I'm jumping up and down like a monkey, warning everybody, and people are looking at me sitting there eating grapes or, eating foliage. Look at him. He's getting upset about nothing. And the equivalent of a Tyrannosaurus Rex has walked up, saliva dripping. I'm watching it eating my fellow humans, and I'm like jumping up and down going, ooga booga, that ain't good. And they're like, shut up, conspiracy theorists. I'm going, look at it. It's eating people. I know Tyrannosaurus Rex weren't around when humans were. My point is that that's a better analogy than, say, a Bengal tiger. Hey, that Bengal tiger's eating people. No such thing as tigers. Oh, really? All right, for the next 40 minutes or so, Dr. Stallman's going to join us. Then I'm going to get some into the fact that these accused Homeland Security perverts are now resigning, which shows there's a lot of evidence pointing to this. And my point is, why would you have all this power and then want to sexually abuse people and, get in their face and things and dominate them? Same reason the TSA wants to see if Osama bin Laden's in your underwear. It's about domination, and the fish rots from the head down. So we're going to be getting into that because there's new lawsuits, new allegations. The hysteria and the fear is intensifying. American Airlines disallows a boarding 16-year-old with Down syndrome because people thought that he looked scary. That's at Infowars.com. Again, yet another DHS worker files discrimination lawsuit against Big Sis. Audit of New York Federal Reserve technocrat creation and cover-up of global financial crash. Big news there at prisonplanet.com. Establishment launches straw man over government bullet purchases, focuses on 174,000 bullets that we mentioned instead of the 1.4 billion. Amazing. We've had AP, Washington Post all attack us. Just that really got them upset that we've realized they're buying armored vehicles and all this stuff against the American people. So we're going to be breaking all of that down as well. Now, joining us to really give us his perspective on what's happening is Dr. Richard Stallman, is a software developer and software freedom activist. He developed GNU, that's the basis of so many of the systems out there today. He graduated from Harvard in '74 with a BA in physics and has received many awards, doctorates, and professorships from his extensive work. In January '84, he resigned from MIT to start the GNU operating system meant to be entirely free software. And he has been the project's leader ever since. And I'm not going to read his whole bio. Most people know who he is if they have any type of brain. But Stallman.org is one of the websites, and he fights against the overuse of copyright as a tyranny. To use my own word, he can correct me if I'm wrong. But the reason I wanted to get him on today is I remember Dr. Stallman, when I was just getting on the internet 15, 16 years ago, warning that they're building back doors and things. It also screws up how the software works. That's why you want the open software. And he's like, they're tracking you. They're listening to you. And then now it's just Google's cars, admittedly, driving around with NSA contracts, hacking your computer, stealing your passcodes. Totally illegal. They don't get in trouble. The FBI has been caught over and over again. It's in the Telecommunications Act. They've got all the access codes to the iPhones, the droids, and now they're denying it even though they've been caught. You've just got a total 1984 society with the smart meters now interfacing with hardwired tech in the dishwashers, the clothes washers, the clock radios. They're making you pay for the tech as part of your purchase. Again, first guy I heard talk about that was Dr. Stallman. And he got criticized for that. And so, how far does it go when the CIA director, since the last time Dr. Stallman was on, probably 6 months ago, has now come out at a public conference at InQtel, at a CIA funding conference, and says, yeah, we're using everything to listen to you. It's all got back doors. Ha, ha, ha. So we've gone from denying it just 5, 6 years ago with Bush to now it's just in your face. I wanted to get his take on that and then all this talk of hacking the brain, the rest of it. We asked him what he thought of that. Dr. Stallman, great to have you on with us, sir.
Hi, thanks. I should point out, though, that I never talk about making software, quote, open, unquote, because that's the term used by the people.
I know. You're the expert. I'm using the wrong semantic. Sure. Okay, well, give us the right semantics.
Software. I talk about free software.
Free.
Freedom-respecting software. With software, either the users control the program or the program controls the users. With free software, the users control the program, and that way we've got a chance of making sure it does what we want it to do and not the other things we don't want it to do. With proprietary software, it's the program that controls the users, and the users typically can't change it and they can't figure out what it's doing. And backdoors and other malicious features are known in many widely used proprietary programs. For instance, there's Microsoft Windows. It has known surveillance features that people have detected over the years. They're not easy to see, but people have encountered them. And it has features specifically to restrict what users can do. These are known as digital handcuffs, or DRM. And it has backdoors. Now, there's one backdoor in Windows that was explicitly made for the police, although I usually prefer to call them the thugs. And it's designed to let them write a program on a pen drive, and when they stick that pen drive into the machine, it takes control. And they can then do anything to it. But there's another backdoor known in Windows that allows remote installation of software changes. Now, that's a universal backdoor. It means that Microsoft, using that backdoor, can do absolutely anything to a machine running Windows. any malicious feature that is not present in Windows today could be remotely installed. It might be there tomorrow or next week. So basically, Windows has zero security. People know that Windows has weak security, but they're actually looking at only half the situation when they say that. They're thinking about security against unknown third parties. But what about the security against Microsoft or anyone that has Microsoft's cooperation? Well, in that case, given that Microsoft can remotely install software changes, the extent of Windows security against Microsoft or Microsoft friends is zero, literally zero. Now, if we look at the iThings, we see that they have malicious features too. Two different spy features were found, and then they were removed, but there could be more. And the digital handcuffs of the iThings are the nastiest ever because Apple pioneered the practice of censoring applications, of restricting what users can install into their computers. And there's also a backdoor that allows remote deletion of applications that are installed. And then if we look at Android, well, a large part of Android is in a theoretical sense somehow free software, but in practice it's not. And Android Market is proprietary software which censors applications and has backdoors. So you've got non-free software with malicious features almost anywhere you look. Flash Player is another example. It has a known surveillance feature which helps websites do surveillance on their visitors. And it has digital handcuffs. So this demonstrates, by the way, that it doesn't really make any difference if the program is gratis. Flash Player, after all, is available at zero price.
Dr. Stallman, couldn't we just interrupt for a moment? Isn't it moral to demand a law for consumers where you can either get the iPhone with all the spy tech or without, and of course the one without would be probably half the price from some of the numbers I've seen, to where it's so immoral to not tell consumers they're being paid, they're paying for mandated globally and by regional governments, mandated spy tech, and then you're never even being told. That is so immoral.
Well, you know, they would charge more if they couldn't spy on you because the information they get is valuable. But in fact, you wouldn't be able to make it work without the spy technology because it's not as if they say, all right, here's the stuff that users are going to really use, and here's the other components that are there just to spy. No, it's the same components that are doing all the things. And so the only way they could remove the spying is if they somehow decided to be ethical. And then how could you trust it anyway? If the users don't have the source code, if the users can't build and run their own version, you can never tell whether it's spying.
And it's the same thing with GMO. They've been caught designing Trojan horses into that. Let me ask you this question. There was a big hubbub. Of course, you're one of the leading experts that can answer this question, but I tried to study it. That the Chinese government was building back doors into all the chips that our military is getting. But then I was researching all these major platforms and governments under the Telecommunications Act and other agreements. They are demanding this be built in so they can get in. And then, sure, it's going to end up in their systems, too. And so it's causing such a big problem. And then they say, give us control of the Internet because of vulnerabilities they demanded be built in.
It could very well be true. It's the sort of thing that you've got to expect governments to do. And I'm sad to say the U.S. government is no longer one that we could expect to be any better in these issues than the Chinese government or the Russian
But, I mean,
government.
why would governments tell, all the chip makers you got to put back doors in it? Obviously, that's going to create a problem.
I don't know for certain that has happened. I'd love to see an article showing evidence that has occurred. All I've seen is speculation that there might be backdoors.
Oh, no, sir, I can get this to you. I mean, it's kind of like the
I'd love to see it. So far, I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, here's just a quick example. The Telecommunications Act of 96 mandated the GPS triangulation in all the phones be ubiquitous by October 1st, 2001. And they gave them, I think it was $10 billion to do it. And yeah, what they do is they go in and set standards on these systems that then they have the companies later give them the codes to. It's kind of like I was told.
That's a specific thing. Yes, it's required for phones to have GPS in them. There was a free software cell phone made in which whether to transmit any information from GPS is under the control of the user's free software. And the users really can say, no, I don't want you sending out any GPS coordinates. However, the problem is that triangulation and GPS are different. GPS is where the phone figures out from satellites where it is and then transmits that data to the phone company.
Via triangulation, giving the thing via the GPS locations of the towers. We'll be back. The creator of the GNU operating system, free software, not open, that led to Linux and so many other things, is on with us. Dr. Richard Stallman, stallman.org, is gracious enough to spend time with us. A very busy individual traveling the world. Haven't been able to get him on the last 6 months. He's been all over the planet doing so much. I want to get into GNU. What is it for folks that don't know? Like me. I mean, I know what it is, but not but I even get it confused with other systems that are free or somewhat free. And then we've got the brain computing interface, points you want to make on that point. And also, you wanted to elaborate on a law that they've got to tell you about spy software that you're being forced to purchase that's been added onto the product. That's washing machines. It's in everything now. Let's hit that first and then get into GNU.
I don't know to what extent current things like washing machines have that surveillance capability in them. It's a very important issue. I've been trying for a few years to get people concerned about smart meters and their potential, their gratuitous potential for surveillance, because I'm pretty sure that most of the potential electric savings could be achieved if the system simply informs your computers about when are the times that electricity is particularly scarce and raises the price for that period of time, and that way most people will choose to have their refrigerators not cool for that hour, and they won't have to tell anybody that they're doing so. They'll just use less electricity when it's expensive, and they'll pay less.
Sure. Well, just to be clear then, because I do focus on the consumer side, I know you're more into the deep guts of it all, but I can give you more examples if you'd like. But almost all the new washers, dryers, and the CIA chief, he brags about this, the new clock radios, under mandates, they're wired in with takeover switches to give you announcements. They've got wireless systems that they admit are interfacing with the wireless meter readers. California says, oh, yeah, we are going to start dialing in and turning things down or off during power, problems.
They shouldn't, for the legitimate goal, which is to reduce the peak electricity demand, there's no need to do the surveillance. They could have somewhat different smart meter systems where they can't spy on you and they can't take control, but they do cause you to pay more for electricity, maybe even 10 times more. They could when it's really in too high demand, and most people would then voluntarily set their certain appliances not to run during.
Sure, my point is that sure,
the
but
spying is gratuitous. That's my point. There's no need for the system to do spying. The reason they're making it do spying is they want spying, and the justifications they're giving are irrelevant. They could achieve the legitimate justification without spying.
Dr. Stallman, are you saying bin Laden is not hiding in a 2-year-old's diaper?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's conceivable that somebody might put a bomb in a 2-year-old's diaper.
Hey, you know what? There might be a bomb right now in your lower intestine. We're going to need to take you in for surgery right now.
Who knows? But that's a somewhat different issue you've got to recognize.
No, but I'm being sarcastic. It's all a giant power grab.
My main concern with the TSA is that they check for things other than bombs or weapons
Oh, yeah, now they're downloading people's laptops and cell phones, as you just said.
Yeah, the point is that the TSA, to make it, I think that in order for the TSA to be constitutional, they should not be allowed to take notice of anything other than a weapon that threatens the safety of the flight.
I disagree. You're an extremist. I think everyone should have proctology exams. I'm being sarcastic, Doctor.
Yeah. Anyway, you said I should tell people about GNU.
Yes, sir. Tell us.
Well, what's GNU is a well-known question. And the answer is GNU is not Unix. GNU is a recursive acronym. It stands for GNU is not Unix. But what does that mean? Well, basically, GNU is an operating system. It's an operating system designed to be entirely free software. That is, entirely software that the users control, no software that controls the users. And lots of people use GNU, but they don't know it because they think that it's Linux. If you hear people talking about using Linux, well, it's really the GNU system together with a program called Linux, which is one component of the system as we use it today. So a fair name for this combination would be GNU plus Linux. The GNU contribution is bigger, but we can share credit with Mr. Torvalds also for the component Linux, which he wrote in 1991 and 2 and so on. So, in fact, lots of people use the GNU system.
I tell you what, tell us more about GNU. We got a long segment. That was a short one. Dr. Stallman is our guest, and I will control myself on TSA humor straight ahead. I want to get into more on that, and then the human-brain interface. What happens when they control the software in your brain and it isn't free? We're going to get into cyborgs and all of the backdoor tech built into the proprietary garbage. Hey, give you sight. Hey, get rid of Alzheimer's. Technology's great, except when it has Trojan horses built into it. We're going to be talking to Dr. Stallman, one of the preeminent experts on this in a moment. His websites are gnu.org or gnu.org and stallman.org. Very important. We're going to define free versus open versus gratis, all here in just a moment, and then get into cyborgs and more. But first off, I've done 2.5 hours here of transmission so far and haven't really plugged anything. You hear our sponsors during the breaks. Also, when you visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com, when you click on the sponsors, that makes our media operation possible. And when you go to InfoWarsStore.com and you buy the books, the videos, the T-shirts, the camo Infowars.com ball caps, the super high-quality water filtration systems that I've researched and tested and have found to be the best out there, like ProPure, you get 10% off that, the Life Straw, all of it right now at InfoWarsStore.com. The Come and Take It shirts, the Liberty or Death shirts, the Noble Lie, the films exposing the vaccines, the best products. We now carry discounted Interfoods own organic storable foods, discounted, and the entire Interfood line, Superfood. All of it available right now are in the TSA T-shirts. It's all there. By the way, they get mad if you wear those. Next time I fly, I am going to wear that, by the way. Oh, you don't like my First Amendment? I don't. As a citizen, I can't want to end this out-of-control power grab that's now on the streets and highways. The point is InfoWarsStore.com, and it's all up there right now, ladies and gentlemen. The awesome Infowars.com camo shirts, free bumper stickers, citizen rule books with all orders. InfoWarsStore.com or link through at PrisonPlanet.com or Infowars.com. Okay, that said, going back to Dr. Richard Stallman, GNU.org, Stallman.org. Let's move quick, though, but we're having even better discussions during the breaks. Finish up on your point about what your software is, and then you're explaining to me the semantical manipulations here, why it's so important. I tend to agree with you. The overuse of the word free, the conflating of the terms versus gratis or open. Explain that to us.
Okay, well, first of all, I almost finished with saying what GNU is. It's an operating system. Many people call it Linux, which is really the name of one piece. Now, there are many different distributions of GNU plus Linux. Some of them are entirely free. Unfortunately, most of them include some non-free software, so I can't recommend them. But you can find out more in gnu.org/distros. That's where we talk about which distros are free and which ones are not, and why they're not. In any case, when I first started talking about free software in 1983, I wasn't aware of the confusion in my own ideas due to the two meanings of the word free. After all, free means zero price, but it also means that you have freedom. Well, after a few years, I figured out I had to explicitly separate these two meanings. So I started saying it's free as in freedom. Sometimes I say it's libre, using a Spanish word that's clear. But then a few years ago, I also realized that whenever I want to talk about zero price, to avoid confusion, I should say gratis. After all, everyone knows gratis means zero price. It's perfectly clear, but this way, whenever I say the word free, it always refers to freedom and only freedom. So this way, at least in my own discourse, I've got a word that refers to freedom unambiguously. Of course, that's not everybody, but you might want to follow this convention too. Now, I'm not going to blame anybody for causing free to have these two meanings. I'm sure that happened a few centuries ago.
Yeah, but explain what free software means. It doesn't mean free in price necessarily.
It's not about price at all. It means it respects the user's freedom and community. And there are four specific essential freedoms that the users need in order to have control over the program they use. Freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you wish. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code and change it to make it do your computing the way you wish. Freedom 2 is the freedom to redistribute exact copies to others when you wish. And Freedom 3 is the freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions to others when you wish. So the first two freedoms give us individual control. One user individually, and any user individually, has control over the program that way. But individual control is not enough, partly because most users don't know how to program. They don't know how to study and change source code. But even if you know how, you use so many programs you couldn't possibly have time to work on them all yourself, even if you're a great programmer. So we need to do this together. We need collective control over the program. And the four freedoms give us both individual control and collective control. When I say collective control, I mean that any group of users who want to use this one version and maintain it, they can. That those who know how to program will do the maintaining of it, and the rest will just use it. But they all get to choose whether to participate in that group, and any group of people that choose to do this are free to do this, people or organizations, because it includes all the users.
Sure.
So that's what free software means precisely. It means that the users have freedom as they ought to.
And you've already basically defined the opposite of that, which is this proprietary. Explain then what the confusion is when they use the word open.
Well, in 1998, there was a political disagreement within the free software community, which had existed for many years. There were those of us who thought of this in ethical terms as a fight for freedom, people like me. And then there were the people who appreciated the software and contributed to it, but they only appreciated it for practical benefits. And they didn't want to present this in terms of right and wrong. And in 1998, they coined the term open source as a way to talk about the field and the software without ever saying free. And nowadays, if you look around, you'll see that the term open source is usually associated with a purely practical approach to the issue, one that's not idealistic, one that doesn't raise it as an issue of justice versus injustice.
Sure. Well, we talked about this.
Software movement.
Sure, we talked about this last time you were on. You know, I'm a multimedia operation to get my information, which is more freedom, out to people from my perspective. And so many times we end up using free or then other softwares that they call open, but a lot of times it is free because the other stuff that's offered by industry, it's not just that it's more expensive, it doesn't work because it's so chock full of spy gadgets. I mean, I told you this example last time. You wanted us to send you some examples. I told the guys to. I don't know if they did. They're so busy. But when you buy televisions now, or when you buy systems, and we're trying to run our own video we've produced over these monitors, we have to go through all sorts of gesticulations because it's got copyright coding on it to try to stop things from playing over it unless it's already coded. And it's like, what? You don't think I'd ever play something that, I produced over this? The point is, it's riddled with these little crud things. And so if it wasn't for free software, we wouldn't be able to get a lot of what we, do done. So I see all this proprietary stuff. It'd be one thing if they were selling proprietary software. It's that they've gotten the rest of industry to put gates in everything to surveil things with prior restraint.
Well, actually, I disagree. I think all proprietary software is an injustice, and I won't touch it. I won't take it.
Well, sure. I mean, you know more about it than I do. I'm just saying it's horrible and it doesn't work, and it surveils me preemptively, saying I'm guilty forever, not even guilty until proven innocent.
This is a consequence of the fact that it's proprietary. You see, with proprietary software, the program controls the users, and the owner controls the program. So proprietary software is an instrument of unjust power, and of course they are tempted to do nasty things to you once they have the power. My point is that you recognize the nasty things that they do to you. My point is that the evil starts with letting them have the power in the first place. It doesn't...
I agree. So what do we do? What do we do?
Reject non-free software. I'm serious.
But I'm saying it's in television sets we buy now.
I won't buy them.
I agree. So what do you do, though?
I won't have a cable set up because the cable box is full of proprietary software that they can upgrade and that it's designed to restrict you. So I don't have cable.
Oh, here's a great example. I told you about this last time. It made the news. Jesse Ventura's TV show, this one episode, aired once. They didn't want it to air again, and they later admitted it. They went in with a computer and erased the show off people's DVRs. They'd paid for the cable. They'd paid for the DVR. It's supposedly their property, but they went in and erased the show.
I didn't know about this. I'd love to see an article about this. I'll spread the word. But, yeah, those DVRs are full of non-free malicious software. It's designed to restrict people. It has digital handcuffs. And the reason, but the point is, people can easily see that the malicious features are an injustice. My point is, the injustice starts deeper down. It starts when they get the power to control what the software does and what it
All right, I want to talk about cyborgs, but what is your this human brain chip interface that you've been researching, and give us your take on that. But Dr. Stallman, the general shape of the web, cybersecurity, internet censorship, internet IDs, internet taxes, clearly the power structure is moving towards a darkening web. A, do you agree with that? B, what's your overall view?
I agree. We're moving towards a kind of information, a computing-enabled tyranny, a surveillance state that's worse than 1984. I often describe portable phones as Stalin's dream, because Stalin would have loved to surveil people as much as portable phones do, but he couldn't.
Yeah, it tracks everywhere you're going. Google admits they can...
Not me, because I don't have one.
They can track where you're... They know what restaurants you're looking up, what movie you're going to go see. I mean, it's literally like a guardian devil following you around.
Yes. Oh, but of course that, it's likely to be because you're looking it up in a Google server, and they just have to connect which phone it is with what search it's doing. Now, when I do a search on the web, which I do not terribly often, but sometimes, I do it in a way that can't be connected with me. Now, there was...
How do you do that? Proxy servers?
Well, actually, I use a shared computer, which I log in on occasionally to do various such things, but mostly they're used by other people, so they can't be connected with me. And I have it delete all cookies at the end of the session, so it can't track me long term that way. I mean, what I'm doing with those machines is not a particularly secret thing. There's nothing.
Still, it's just the exercise that, I mean, it's not particularly secret when I go and close the door and go to the bathroom, but I don't want to live in a glass house.
Exactly.
And so you either exercise these rights or you lose them, and the system wants to just tell us, oh, it's already happened. You don't have any privacy. So you know what? We're going to go ahead and just come in your house now without a warrant. How's that sound?
Yeah, well, Jacob Applebaum just had an interview published where he talks about the precautions that people take who really don't want to be spied on. Freedom campaigners like him.
Wow, let's get into these brain chip interfaces. I mean, it's a labyrinth of good things, but the problem is that all of it being rolled out from day one is proprietary and run by these control freaks.
Yeah, well, basically what the recent study showing that they can get information about people by using these commercial brain-computer interfaces demonstrates that if you use one, you're placing a lot of trust in whatever software is running it. And the only way software can deserve that kind of trust is if it's free software. So this is yet another example of how if you use non-free software, you're a sucker and they're white.
Yeah, it's like watching mainstream television. You're being brainwashed, you're being given subliminals, you're asking for it. And, I mean, this is hacking the brain. They're now saying they can go in and use programs to grab data. They're now putting passive MRIs in a few airports to passively scan us. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, well, people have got to realize that perfect safety against any threat doesn't exist, and that going to desperate lengths and sacrificing an essential freedom for a little bit more temporary security is a mistaken goal.
Well, it creates the great threat. Guys, pull up the Eisenhower quote. President Eisenhower said, if you want safety, go to prison. Of course, you're not really even safe there, he went on to add. I mean, the great threat is those that say, give up your rights, we'll protect you.
Yep.
So is there any way to turn this around?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know anything I could do that would turn it around. If I knew something, I'd be doing it. All I know how to do is try to spread the word and push wherever I get a chance.
You talk to, I know, a lot of, fellow tech elites out there. I know you don't want to be called that, but, you're highly respected. I know you go to these conferences and things and rub shoulders. People like Bill Joy have said, hey, what we're building is dangerous 12 years ago in his Wired magazine piece, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us. I mean, do the elites think they're not going to get caught?
No. I don't know that many people who would call themselves elite. I tend to know activists, not
okay, but my question is, what is the establishment's got to know that the trap they've built, they're going to end up falling into it? And this is not a good idea.
They probably just compartmentalize their lives. That's my guess.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, I've actually talked to rocket scientists, billionaires, and they're smart at one level, but they don't get the bigger picture.
I'm afraid they don't. In any case, they probably have so many interests at stake in continuing down the path they're on that they prefer not to worry about how it might bite them someday.
Yeah, it's kind of like let them eat cake, Marie Antoinette.
No, I wouldn't think so. I don't think that they're quite analogous. But basically, they're so concerned with what they know they have to do for success in their careers that they disregard how that might affect their own freedom down the line.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that kind of leads to the disconnect of Marie Antoinette, where she didn't understand what the policies were doing outside the palace. I do think the ruling class...
That she was safe from them. Barring a revolution, she knew that she was never going to go hungry. So she really didn't have to worry. She was really going to be spared if there had not been a revolution. That's not true for these people. They may get spied on just as badly as you and I do, but they don't think about that.
Wow. Well, we've got a final segment with you, Doc. What do you want to cover when we come back in this next little 6-minute segment?
Oh, gee, beats me. I can't think of it. Oh, well, there's the issue of that just recently came up, the false Bruce Willis rumor about how he was going to sue Apple about letting someone inherit his collection of iTunes music. And that's an important issue.
Oh, yeah, they're now saying you can't even pass on something that's on one of these platforms. It's incredible. Stay there. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Stallman's our guest. I didn't even get into cost of chemtrail program, put at $5 billion a year. They say they want to add stuff to all the jet fuel to put particulate up to save us from global warming. Oh, really? That's what they're already doing covertly. But now they got a big article up at Infowars.com out of Reuters admitting the exact chemtrailing we claim they were doing, but saying they're planning it in the future with $5 billion. So amazing report there. Dr. Richard Stallman, stallman.org, gnu.org is our guest. Here we got about 5-6 minutes left. We were talking during the break about, you know, how to use search engines without being tracked. Startpage.com I think is pretty good, but again, it's not that you're bad. It's that they're spying on you and creating an algorithm on you. I mean, do you go to just a psychologist randomly and tell them everything about you so they can share it with the government? That's what's happening when you're on this. They're using it for nefarious purposes. But getting back to, this hoax that, oh, see, Bruce Willis doesn't want his stuff willed. And then Apple saying, yeah, you don't own the songs you paid for. I mean, and then everything's up on the cloud. Oh, I've gone through this now, sir. People make claims that my voice is copyrighted now to erase my videos off YouTube, and I've never signed a deal with anybody to say that. And when I complained to YouTube, they put a strike against our account for daring to complain. And then now the guy that does the Transformers voice, when he does interviews with school kids, they knock the video down saying his voice is copyrighted. When I have Joe Rogan on, they take the videos down saying they're copyrighted, even though Joe never agreed to any of that. So I meant to ask you about all those points.
Well, I don't put anything on YouTube because I can't watch YouTube. You see, the YouTube site requires that you run non-free software one way or another. And since I won't run the non-free software, I can't see YouTube.
No, but what about, I understand with you, but I mean the fact that they can, in the cloud, erase all the books they want, 1984, they could erase your voice. I mean, this is really dangerous. This makes, Fahrenheit, whatever it is, burning the books. Yeah.
Well, I don't like to use the term the cloud, because it's a nebulous term. Right now, you're using it for one particular kind of service, and I know what you mean. But other people use the same term to mean other things, and people don't realize that these are several different things being called by one name, so I never use that term.
You're putting your stuff in somebody else's server under their rules.
Right, I agree, and, well, that's what you're talking about, and I think we shouldn't do that, and I don't do that. I have some recordings of music in digital form. I don't store them in some service. I have them on disks and USBs, and that's the only place I'm going to have them. And
the system admits they want to go to cloud to control us. I mean, this is a bad thing.
Yes, well, the point, I don't want to use the term cloud, but those services are a bad thing, and this Bruce Willis rumor might have been false in regard to Bruce Willis, but it's true in regard to what's bad about iTunes. You shouldn't use iTunes at all. I mean, you can't use iTunes unless you're using non-free software, which you shouldn't use because you lose control of your computing. So, of course, it's bad. But then this just shows how once they've got this non-free software, that they use that to exercise more control of you. So you shouldn't let them get the first level of control over you, and you shouldn't buy anything in digital form unless it gives you the same freedoms as a printed book or a CD or an LP record. If you look at stallman.org/ebooks.pdf, you'll see this issue for ebooks. Most commercial ebooks are fundamentally unethical in 3 ways. There are digital handcuffs. They make you sign a contract so you don't get the same rights you would get if you bought a printed book, and you can't buy them anonymously.
Dr. Stallman, thank you so much. Amazing job. That's right. And earlier in the broadcast, it will be coming up in retransmission. We had New York Times journalist, foreign editor, Middle East editor, Pulitzer Prize winner Chris Hedges on saying the ultimate tyranny is upon us. We have Dr. Richard Stallman, the creator of pretty much the free software movement, gnu.org. We're doing a little bit of overdrive with him right now. Sir, you were trying to finish up how we deal with the digital handcuffs, how bad iTunes is, how bad it is that Kindle last year, as you know, erased thousands of books that people paid for, including 1984. And then now they've been caught in price fixing and things to try to bankrupt the print media. That's why I've come out with a print once-a-month newspaper with our web stories and some exclusive stuff. By the way, folks, we have a few extra copies of that. They're almost sold out because we'd sold out, but then we had about 3,500 extra that hadn't been put on the streets. We discovered in the warehouse. That warehouse isn't here, so that's available at InfoWarsShop.com, but they're almost all gone if you want that first September issue. But going back to Mr. Stallman, finishing up your point, Doctor, about how to mitigate this tyranny and how to have a revolution against it, because what you and others are doing, from my layman perspective, is one of the real revolutions against this technocracy, so we salute you.
Doing my best. You were talking about the Amazon swindle, as I prefer to call it. It was in 2009 that they deleted thousands of copies in 1984. And then they promised they would never do that again unless ordered to by the state. So, but in general, the swindle takes away readers' traditional freedoms. For instance, there's the freedom to buy a book anonymously, which you can still do in a bookstore if you pay cash. And that's the only way I buy books. I don't use a credit card. And then there's the freedom to give a book to someone else after you read it, or to lend it to people after you read it, or to sell it to someone else. They take those away with digital handcuffs. And then there's the freedom to keep the book as long as you wish, which they took away with that back door. Well, for any one of these reasons, it's unacceptable. And the competitors to the swindle are not quite as bad, but they're still mostly as bad. So they're no good either. So in order for an ebook to be legitimate and ethical, it has to be possible to buy it anonymously. It must not make you sign any contract so that you get the same rights you would get with a printed book. And it must not come in a secret format designed to make you use...
You have to be able to share it. So you just get a digital form that you can share because you bought it. It's your physical property.
Yeah. So the point is, if you look at stallman.org/ebooks.pdf, you'll see my campaign to make ebooks ethically acceptable. But you've raised a broader issue, basically that of the technological police state, and what do we do about that? Well, I don't know what to do about that, except try in the areas where I see some opportunity and say no. I have a lot of practice in saying no to things other people will do. 20 years ago, I didn't use my credit card very often, but whenever it seemed convenient, I would do it. Nowadays, I just don't, except for buying airline tickets because they know my name anyway. The point is, I'm saying no. I never started to have a portable phone because the tracking bothered me.
But they want to take the airport model and expand it to face deals. Oh, Facebook. We only have 30 seconds. Face deals where they want to face scan you to buy and sell, and then they give you little discounts.
Well, I won't do it. I don't use the supermarket loyalty cards now, except once in a while I'll give someone else's number. And I don't mind doing that.
Well, amazing interview, Dr. Stallman. Thank you so much for the time. Stallman.org. Hopefully we can get you back on in another 6 months, sir.
Whenever you like.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Stallman. I'll say bye to you during the break. What a gentleman. Stallman.org, GNU.org. I'm Alex Jones of PrisonPlanet.tv.